accomplishing big things in small steps. I mean, that's the one that I think intuitively the people in the fitness business owners group probably should get, right? Like, we understand that somebody comes into the gym and they're not going to lose 20 pounds in a day. And so we talk about this compounding effect that, we get to help people achieve over time, and that people stay the course and can really reap the rewards if they're willing to just kind of take these small incremental steps day after day. Well, I think we get that. I think we understand it. I don't know that we're always great about putting it into practice on the business side of things. So I'll tell you what, Morgan, if you're ready to go with this, I'm ready to roll, because I want to give a little bit of context, and then I want to get really kind of practical in how somebody can do this today. So if you're good to go, then let's talk about how you guys can take these bigger goals, these things that really inspire you, motivate you. Hopefully, if we're talking about business, they're the things that really caused you to want to build a business, to be a business owner, to take on all the responsibilities of ownership. And one of the things that I've kind of come to understand in my time in the industry, when I got into this field, I had no business background. I was a college baseball coach, a college strength coach. I taught at a university, no business, and working at a small state-funded university is a terrible way to learn business. Maybe being a college sports coach is okay, but the thing that I probably didn't embrace then, but I see now is, I thought I was the oddball. I thought, man, I came into this and I know this side of things, but I don't know business. And, I've come to appreciate the fact that I was very, very much similar to so many people who are in the industry who, man, they are lights out when it comes to helping people lose weight, transform their bodies, improve the way they feel about themselves, get out of pain, improve performance. They are world-class at that. And they understand how to really not only put a plan in place that somebody can execute, but facilitate the execution of that plan and course correct along the way. But I think sometimes I know I had a blind spot in the beginning, right? Like, I had a big blind spot to some of the business stuff that fortunately I was able to figure out over time. And I'm going to share some of how I've applied this in my own dealings on the various businesses I've owned, as we go through this little training today. But so much of it just runs parallel to the stuff that we do on the training side, right? I mean, if you think about if somebody came to you and they said, look, I'd really love to lose 15 or 20 pounds. They've got this ambitious goal. It's inspiring to them. It got them out of their comfort zone to the point that they came to see you. And they're willing to exchange some of their time and effort and probably money in order to move towards that goal. And we come up with this masterful plan where we say, okay, you're going to come see us 3 hours a week, because that's all the time that you probably have. And we're going to craft a plan that is going to fit within that 3 hours, 3 individual single-hour containers of time that, improves your strength, improves your self-confidence, it increases your metabolism, probably helps you move better, function better, and also gives you this sense of accomplishment that hopefully carries over in the other 165 hours, right? And we're going to give you a blueprint for what to do in those other 165 hours as well when it comes to nutrition or recovery or additional physical activity. And we're really good at crafting that out. And it's so simple, right? Like, it becomes second nature for us. We're saying, okay, big goal, here's how we break it down, because we understand that, like, man, this isn't The Biggest Loser. We're not moving these people into a compound where we control every waking hour of their day. Like, we're trying to say, let's fit this stuff in to the time they have with the resources they can commit. And we're building a plan around that. But man, are we not doing the same thing when it comes to business? It's like we forget this wonderful concept, this thing that we've broken down and done so well. We get into this kind of, hey, I'm going to market. Like, if I say, hey, what are you going to do this week to move your business forward? Well, I'm going to market. And that's like saying, well, I'm going to exercise. There's no meaningful breakdown of what that looks like, when you're going to do it, how much time it's going to take. And it's all the same stuff, right? Like, it is all the same stuff. Sure, we can swap in different tactics, just like we swap in different movements. But the framework remains the same. The framework remains the same. So if you tell me, hey, I want to add $10,000 a month to my monthly recurring revenue over the next 18 months, then the goal is great if that gets you inspired. The goal is wonderful if that serves as your North Star to keep you moving forward, because you have this vision of how your life's going to be better when you've achieved this, and how your business is going to operate better, and how you're going to be able to have cash flow to hire people or do different things. But ultimately, the things that we do on a weekly basis are the ones that really have to compound over time to get to where we're going. And if we think about our behaviors under the same kind of, like, through the same lens, I guess, as we do our clients' behaviors, moving towards these fitness goals. And we tell people, oh, it's a lifestyle, and you've got to, change these behaviors, and you've got to install these habits that pay off over time. It's a lot of the same stuff, but how does that happen practically? Well, I'll give you how we do that from a process standpoint. And I'll even kind of tell you about some of the things we're doing to make it even easier. And you're going to say, man, that just sounds almost exactly like what we do with training clients. Exactly. So we typically work off of 4 different types of cycles, if you will. There's our annual cycle, that, like, what are our goals for the year? What would be inspiring to us? Then, and I tell anybody, write that stuff in pencil. If we learned anything during the pandemic, it's that we're not awesome at predicting the future. So, write it in pencil, but think about the things that inspire you and clarify your focus. And we map out like 3 to 5 personal, 3 to 5 professional goals. And we talk about how we're going to get there. Then we work in 6-week cycles. That's the next breakdown. A 6-week cycle, we say, okay, what are we going to accomplish in the next 6 weeks? And that's when we get into the things like what we would do with clients, like losing 10 pounds, 15 pounds, improving performance. Like, there's something with some constraints. There's an end point where they're probably hoping to achieve this goal by. Well, for us, we've landed on 6 weeks as kind of being the sweet spot in our world. And man, I've done 90-day stuff. I'm friends with Todd Herman, who wrote the 90-day year and has that program. We've done 100-day sprints. We've seen all that. And for me, the fun thing about 6 weeks is it's long enough to do meaningful work, right? It's not just these immediate little tactical things, but it's, you can make some things actually happen in that time frame, but it's not so long that it feels vague. It's, you kind of have a handle on what's coming up in the next 6 weeks. And it doesn't feel like if something's not in this 90-day, like in a 90-day window, I'd always feel like, man, I have to include too much because I don't want to put things off too far down the line. You don't feel that way in 6 weeks because you're like, man, there'll be another 6 weeks after that. So So we use this 6-week cycle. Sometimes it feels like a sprint, and sometimes it's just a nice, comfortable jog, right? Depending on where you are throughout the course of the year and what else you have going on. And we map out what we can accomplish realistically in that time frame. Our production goals, our process goals, and our project goals. And really every goal falls into one of those buckets, right? Production for us is a numerical thing. Revenue, income, number of clients, number of leads, something like that. Process goals are things that we're trying to create as a systematic or habit-based way of doing things that will continue on after that 6 weeks. And then project goals are things that have a finish line. You know, if you're going to write a book, if you're going to create a new website, something like that, those are project goals. So everything kind of fits into that bucket. Even your personal stuff all kind of fits into those buckets. And then we ratchet it down and we talk about winning the week. And this is where I think a lot of people start to let things start to get loose, right? They don't know how to take the bigger goals and move them into this win the week approach. So for us, creating your weekly game plan, it begins by saying, okay, what are the 3 things that I want to accomplish this week to move forward? Not 3 things to sustain where I am. I'm talking allocate your time and resources to the things you've already committed to. Like, so if you have training clients, that time is already committed, right? If you got to go pick your kid up at school, or like for me, I got to run baseball practice for my little 12U team that my son's on tonight. Those are obligations I've already made. So if I'm trying to improve from where I am, it's like, well, okay, what am I going to do differently? What are my 3 things that I'm going to do, my action items? And when we're selecting those, the first criteria is it's got to be something that you can do with the time you have and the resources that you can commit, right? And that's where this dovetails so nicely with what we do with training clients. If we think about this, in a perfect world, if somebody came to you and said, look, your livelihood depends on me losing 20 pounds, the best thing that you could probably do would be to like lock them in your house so you can control everything that they're doing, right? Like you're not letting them hop over to get fast food or order pizza. You're controlling what their exercise looks like, what their recovery looks like, but that's not practical, right? So that's the first thing that we think about. That's why I talked about those things we're already committed to. It has to be something that you can do with the resources and time that you actually have available. Morgan, did you have a hand up?
I do for time. So that is something that I feel like everybody at some point says, I don't have enough time. So if that is what people are struggling with, how can they evaluate really how much time they have? Because I think we always overcommit to things. So how do we really figure out, I really only have an hour or I really only have 3 hours? How do you kind of do an audit of that?
Well, I think that the word you just used is perfect, right? There's an audit. Like you actually just track it. You document it. You look at it on your phone and, okay, what did I do from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock? What did I do from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock? And you just fill it in on such simple free tools like Google Calendar. You can just document things as you go and you know what's left over. And I'm not telling you, like, we're not even talking about how do we pair off things that we've already committed to. I'm saying, like, let's make the most of the time that's available. And then if we need to make some trades, we can do that. But until we're actually saying, okay, I've already committed to these appointments, these training sessions, I've got to write programs during this time, I've got to pick my kid up at school at that time. Until we've said, okay, these containers are full. Now we don't really know what's left. So we have to go and assess where we are with that. And then we can say, okay, well, I've got 30 minutes on Monday. I've got 90 minutes on Tuesday. I've got 45 minutes on Wednesday. And we say, okay, well, what can I do in the time I have available with the resources I can commit. So some of that, like, we'll get into in a moment, but it all should be based in reality, right? It to me is a little bit like saying, okay, you have this new person in the gym and they're coming to you and they've been sedentary and they're just embarking on an exercise program. They have no understanding of technique or whatever else. I mean, we're not going to say, cool, well, let's do cleans and snatches on day one. They may have the time to do that, but they don't have the ability, the experience to do it yet. So we have to be a realist about what we can do with this time. So that's the first thing. The second thing that we do is we want to be able to clearly tie those 3 action items to those 6-week goals, right? So, okay, I know I've got this much time. So when I'm choosing things, the way that I'm vetting the choices, can I do it? What's realistic? Is it going to move me towards where I want to go? And then the third is it should be able to be measured or quantified. And the difference between the two, in my mind, is measuring for the purposes of this is just, is there a number attached to it, right? Like if I say I'm going to do something for lead generation, I should be able to know, well, did I get no leads, 1 lead, 2 leads, 5 leads? And then from the other type of quantification, it's like, well, did I get as far on this as I said I wanted to? And this is why I think that, again, we have to ground ourselves in reality. You have to say, okay, if one of your 6-week goals is to have a rough draft of a book, based on the time you have available you're going to allocate to this. You don't say, I'm going to work on my book. You say, okay, I'm going to write 1,000 words towards my book, or I'm going to create the outline. So we have something that we can say, did it or didn't do it? And there's not like a passing or failing grade. It's fine. Like if you got 80% of the way there or 90% of the way there. But what we can do then is say, I overestimated or underestimated how long this would take, so I get better at this next time, right? And that comes back again, if we're looking at how we do this with training clients, typically they're like progressions and regressions for a lot of things, right? So we learn as we go and we course correct. That's what I alluded to with course correction. So if somebody can't perform something, then we adapt. Well, here, same thing. Whereas a lot of people, they'll try a Facebook ad, they say it doesn't work, and they'll quit. They don't adapt, right? They don't course correct. They just stop. And clearly, we would never tell a training client, well, if you were bad at push-ups today, you should never do push-ups again. You should just stop. No, we'd say, okay, well, here's what we're trying to accomplish with that. What other thing can we do to solve that problem? How can we adapt this, whether it's another, it's a variation of a push-up, or do we have some other push exercise that we're going to sub in for that? So it has to be measured, quantified, and from my standpoint, it needs to be something you're capable of doing. And, when I say capable of doing, let me give you an example to just add a little more context to that. So like, let's say, hey, I want to go start running Google ads, and I've got an hour allocated to that this week. Well, if you're not capable of running Google ads yet, like if you haven't ever run them before, then maybe week 1 is I'm going to learn how to launch a Google ad. And then week 2 is I am going to deploy my first version of a Google ad. So when I say it needs to be something you can do, if you don't already have the skill set, clearly you're capable, you're competent, you can learn the skill set, but if you don't have it yet, then that needs to be your action item. Developing it or renting it from somebody else, right? So when we think about our actions, that's how we start to kind of frame things up, right? And then here's one that I think a lot of people kind of overlook, me included. What could potentially stop you or stand in your way from getting these action items done? We need to identify that. We need to identify like what could be a stumbling block for us, and proactively go about problem solving. Well, if you don't know how to do something, then maybe we back up a step and say, how do I gain the capability of doing that thing? Or if we are relying on another party to be, to comply, like we talk a lot about networking meetings in our coaching groups, right? With our 100 Cups approach or ask for advice approach. Well, if you're relying on somebody to meet you somewhere, well, what could stop you from completing this? Well, if they cancel, if they reschedule, then there's a plan B, right? What is our potential solution? We troubleshoot, because obviously we need to move forward. If we're actually going to build a better business week after week, we need to find a plan B to move forward. And that's the next kind of variable that most people miss. If they hit a roadblock with a lot of this stuff, they just stop, right? And it's kind of like, if you're traveling and normally you work out in the hotel gym, but maybe you go to a hotel and there's no hotel gym. Well, do you have a plan B? Like, are you going to do a workout in your room? Are you going to go do stairs and, in the corridor there? Are you going to go out and do something outside the gym? Like, do you have a workaround? Have you done troubleshooting? Have you identified an alternative solution? And then finally, we need to schedule this with specifics. So if you say, I'm going to write, what are you going to write? Or if you say, I'm going to network, are you going to attend a networking meeting? Are you going to go to a coffee shop and make a point to connect with one or two people? Be specific, give yourself realistic targets in the time you have, and understand that if we're doing 3 of these a week, 50 weeks a year, we've taken 150 steps towards where we want to go, not just sustaining where we are. Now, you may think of that whole sustaining thing as boring and maybe it's not applicable to you, but if you look at the statistics for small businesses in the United States, at least, they're not awesome, right? Like, most small businesses don't make it 5 years. A really small percentage of them make it 10, and a minute percentage of small businesses make it to 20 or 25. Those are people who are not focused on getting better. Those are people who, on average, did a lot of sustaining and waited for things to come to them. They were essentially just playing defense. Well, if we want to play offense, then this is a simple, predictable, and consistent way that we can do it that compounds over time. So we come up with our 3 action items. They're specific. There's a way that we can measure or quantify them. They're things that we can do. And over time, our capacity increases. And so the things we can do become, more impactful, more complex, whatever. And then at the end of the week, we review. We say, what worked? What didn't? This isn't time to beat yourself up. Entrepreneurs are wonderful at that and terrible at celebrating. It's a time to celebrate the wins, even if it's a simple, hey, you know what? I feel a sense of accomplishment for doing what I said I was going to do. Just like a client, they don't have to necessarily have a party for having a workout, but they should have a sense of accomplishment for completing this morning's training session, right? And then we learn from the things that maybe didn't go as planned. We don't beat ourselves up. If we got halfway done on something, we say, well, I didn't realize it would take that long. Or I didn't realize that there were some steps in this that I didn't already know. Or, man, it would be really good for me to go read something or watch a video about this or training to get a little more mileage out of this. And then we optimize and we do the next week. Now, again, this does not sound like the magic bullet. This doesn't sound like anything somebody's going to run a Facebook ad to. It'll work way better than all those, because I mean, this is essentially what we based our livelihood on, right? This is basically saying this is how you achieve big goals. We break them down and we take consistent actions that we get better at over time. So there's a little bit of progressive overload, right? There's a way to move towards where we want to go in a fashion that allows us to make progress, to increase our capacity, to gain confidence, and to probably just, I mean, for lack of a better way of putting this, become better business owners week by week. So if you're not taking this approach now, man, I would really encourage you to say, you know what? Maybe this thing that I'm basing my livelihood on to deliver results to others would work for me, and put it into action. And I'll take it even a step further. I'll explain to how we're doing this in our coaching programs. We actually just installed a weekly game plan, like a win the week action planning session for all of our clients each week, where we do this with them and hold them accountable. But we've created a mountain of checklists I was just telling Morgan about before we started, because sometimes the action items, like, man, I don't know where to start, or I don't want to have to go do a bunch of research, figure this out, or dig through a bunch of videos. We've created almost 60 different checklists for the core action items it takes to build a $25,000 a month training business, to basically say, man, just pull from this menu, execute these things over time, and you're going to get to where you want to go. We've created the roadmap. We've created the checklists. All you have to do is come and follow the same plan that you would deliver to clients, just the same way that you would create programs for them that if they execute, they're going to get really powerful results. So that's how we're putting it into action. And I want to tell you, because this isn't theory. This is what you do. This is what I do. What we're trying to accomplish here is essentially the same thing. It's just sometimes we drift from the things that we actually know that work, because we don't understand how well they translate 1 degree away, 2 degree away from where we're currently using them. So, Morgan, that's a bunch. I've talked a lot. What you got for me?
So I guess my first question is, somebody who's listening to this, you talked about annual, you talked about 6 week, you talked about daily. This seems like a lot. Where should somebody start? If they had to pick one, would it be figuring out how much time they have in the day? Would it be creating that annual goal? Where's the best place to start? Smaller or with that annual goal?
Probably weekly. Probably. Okay. Like if you're doing weekly and break that down to a day-by-day thing, and just, it gives you a sense of control, right? It allows you to feel like, I use the phrase playing defense. It allows you to feel like you're playing offense again. Like, I am in control of my time. I know what I'm already committed to. I know what I have left available. Here's how I'm going to use that. We can always become more effective at how we're using things, but until we know what we actually have available, it becomes kind of a crapshoot to figure that out. So I would tell you, get some clarity on your week. And in some cases, it's already half done for us, right? If you're running a training business, you know what training sessions you already have scheduled, right? So it's those other things that maybe we haven't put on the calendar yet, like when you're designing a program or the personal things that you have, that as long as we add that, it becomes a little bit clearer. And now we say, okay, well, I've got like 8 hours to work with this week. Doing anything with that 8 hours with purpose or intent is a step in the right direction. But then we can start to become more effective. A lot of people fall in love with the word efficiency. The most efficient thing to do is just not do the wrong thing at all, right? So we got to figure out what works first.
Mhm. Awesome. So another question, when you mentioned annual goal examples, when I started my business, I think I set a very unrealistic annual goal because it's like, oh, it's this big thing. And then I got to that point and I didn't feel super confident in it. So how do you suggest people starting out or even a couple years in finding an annual goal that is reachable based on your knowledge and like creating something that actually makes sense rather than just like the dream that we throw out there sometimes?
Well, I mean, you used a couple wonderful words there, right? Goal and dream. I think dream is usually in my mind, and these are my ways of describing this. It's far from accurate. Like it's just the way that I view it, right? I think a dream is something we would love to have, we wish we could have, we would love to arrive at. I think for me, a realistic goal is something we can actually see a path towards. Like we have to be able to reverse engineer a way that it gives us some likelihood of getting there. And if you said, hey, you know what, Pat, I'm going to start a brand new training business in a brand new town where I don't know anybody, and I want to do $1 million this year. Well, the first thing I would ask you is how many months have you ever done $83,333 in a month? Because if the answer is zero, then we probably need to adapt the goal, right? Because if we're saying this is going to be our average and we've never even hit that as a peak, then we probably need to look at, okay, well, that's not a short-term goal. That can be a longer-term goal, but a short-term goal, there has to be some sort of evidence that we can get there. And that doesn't mean it's, hey, we've already done it, but like the simple way that I would tell you is if you told me, hey, I'd like to get 100 new clients. Well, if you've gotten 10 new clients in a month before, even if it was a great month, then we know that we can get ahead of that run rate because that would be a run rate of 120. So, there's probably some things that we've done or things that we're close to doing that would allow us to get there. Or, hey, I'm going to be adopting this proven roadmap that allows me to get there. I know because maybe I've not done it, but I'm adopting something that I got plenty of evidence that people like me have already, used successfully under similar circumstances.
Awesome. And I think that's really helpful because when we are in that startup phase or we're getting into a coaching program, finding a realistic goal, I think, is one of the hardest things because we want to dream big. We want to have this big thought about but we have to look back at evidence. I got two more.
Big is wonderful. Dreaming big usually isn't a 12-month thing. Like 12 months goes by pretty quick, right? Like, but imagine that we said, okay, you're going to get 60 clients your first year in your small group training business. And then the next year, you're going to get another 100. And the next year, you're going to get 150. Like it doesn't take a lot of time for somebody to have a powerhouse business because now I've got this year of experience under my belt. I've got these wins that I've accrued. I've got so many of these action items that I've, employed successfully, and all the ancillary benefits that yields. It's just, in the finance world, they'll talk about the magic of compound interest. There's a lot of that comes to play here. It's just, people love to buy the dream, right? They love to buy, well, hey, I'm going to manifest my way to a yacht next week, right? I'm like, that's great, but if you actually take a practical approach You probably have that yacht in 3 years, right? Like, but you have to be willing to make the trade that a lot of people they want somebody to trade the good stuff to them, but they're not willing to trade what it is in exchange for it, right?
Absolutely. So when you're creating your 6 week sprints, I know you have a team. I'm
Mhm.
part of the team. And we each kind of have different roles. So how do you work that 6 week sprint with your teammates? Like, for instance, does Matt have his own 6 weeks and you have your own 6 weeks, or is 6 weeks all the same and everybody's tasks are different?
Um, I would say that there are parallel 6 week cycles or sprints happening simultaneously, right? Because everybody has a role that they're accomplishing, and everybody has a personal that is independent of whatever it is that I'm saying, hey, business wise, this is where we'd like to go. So, I think that from my perspective, at least, and again, everybody can have their own take on this. I think Matt's needs to be in alignment with mine, but it doesn't have to be mine. I think that, he needs to play his role in a way that is moving towards our vision for whatever we're trying to accomplish professionally, but is very fulfilling to him, both personally and professionally, because I think that's the only longevity. I think that, if I'm hell bent on everybody going and executing my plan, but I'm not sensitive to theirs, that's great in the short term for me. But if I want those people to really buy in and care about this stuff in the long term, there needs to be plenty, like their plan needs to be more about them than it is about me.
And I just took on a new teammate this year. So she's doing X amount of hours a month, but it's trying to think of how do we grow the business together with her role. So that was really helpful of just like, yeah, that was helpful because it's hard to mesh when you have other moving parts and pieces.
Well, one thing that I think we lose sight of, I don't care if it's a business to consumer thing, like a training business and a client, or a business to business type of thing, like where the clients I coach or even teammates, is like every person is like their own, the sun and the planets are spinning around them, right? Like, and I think I don't know where I arrived at this, but I am hyper conscious of that at all times, that whatever I'm asking of somebody, I'm not asking it of them in a vacuum, right? Like they have other things going on in their life, good, bad, whatever it is. They have their own things they're trying to achieve from their role in this business as well. And I don't think that that's the norm. I don't think that most people look at it that way, but I'm sure it's an accumulation of things that have happened along the way that have caused me to look at it that way. But I think that that's how you get people who want to pull the rope in the same direction for a long time. And in a world where most small businesses don't make it 5 years, like my goal is to have a small business that makes it not only for a long time, but is really fulfilling for anybody who wants to be involved for a long time.
I did not know the stat about the 5 years of a small business. That's
Oh, it's like some like 80% small businesses fail within 5 years. But I mean,
wow.
statistics are like anything else, right? Like they're kind of loaded and you can manipulate them any way you want. I mean, a small business could be a network marketing business that was a work at home thing that was started and closed or whatever, right? Like, so it's not every storefront, like, 4 out of every 5 storefronts closed. I mean, there's some that are going to be higher probability success stories than others. But in general, it's hard. Like business is hard because we're taking on more personal responsibility than, most other career choices. And because we're doing that, there's more stress. So it becomes something that, it can weigh on people personally, and they just stop because that kind of stress drives them away from it, or they work longer hours than they need to for the rewards they're getting in exchange or whatever. Doesn't mean they all would go bankrupt. Sometimes people are just like, look, the trade's not worth it. So in my case, when I'm thinking about building a successful business, and we've talked about this on so many different Zooms, I am relentlessly realistic about who people are, what I think is fair to expect of people. And I don't mean that like a pessimistic way. I mean, like, I don't expect people to wake up and just spend their entire day worrying about what I want or what I think. I need to find an environment or create it, I guess, an environment that allows my goals to be aligned with theirs, and them wanting to pull the rope in that direction, because it's a win for them career-wise. It's a win for them from a fulfillment standpoint. It's a win for me because I'm trying to make this whole thing work. And as importantly as anything, it's a win for the clients. Like, we're creating something where they want to stick around. And, I think that there's so many layers to this when we talk about the compounding stuff and the small weekly action items. It's like making deposits in anything. We talk about this. We were talking about marketing. There would be making relationship deposits so that, when you make an offer, you get a better response, or making relationship deposits so that if somebody leaves, it's like they're taking a vacation. It's not like they're trying to get away from you forever. Right. So, so much of this stuff runs, kind of runs tandem. And if you embrace this weekly game plan stuff that I just alluded to, I think for most of the people in our industry, this kind of hits home, right? Like, they get this, they care about the people they serve. They try to create plans to make things successful for those people. And sometimes we got to apply that thinking to ourselves. Sometimes we have to say, okay, if I'm rooting for me, like I root for other people, and if I'm trying to set me up to succeed like I do them, what would that look like? And frankly, it probably looked a lot like what we just went over.
So one point to touch on before we do have a question in Facebook I want to get answered is, you said win the week. You've got multiple programs. Which ones are you running that in now? So if anyone's interested in learning about them, they kind of have a sense of what that coaching that you've transformed into looks like.
So we have it in the Business Growth Sprint. That's a win the week. That's kind of more of a concierge one-on-one supported version of it. We have it in the Ideal Business Accelerator program, which is kind of the core program to take people from kind of that launch stage of business to a $25,000 a month type of business. And then we are about a week away from installing it in the launch program for those people who are early stage, under $10,000 a month, where we can even simplify what their action items should be, instead of them feeling like, oh, I've got such a big menu to pull from. Like, no, let's go with the ones that are going to give you the biggest bang for the buck. So.
Awesome. And if you're watching and you want to talk about any of those in depth, just drop steps in the comments below. I will reach out to you. We'll have a conversation. So if that's interests you at all. And we did have a question from Spencer. So thank you, Spencer, for posting in the Facebook group just earlier today. If you guys have questions as the week goes on and you're like, I'll post it in there, we'll get you answers. I know Fred already responded to this, but we'd also like your opinion, Pat. Spencer says, I have a question. I have had several professional athletes come through and train at the facility I manage over the years, from pro football players to basketball players like Grayson Allen. The current ownership advises this with laminated pictures and posters all over the walls with thumbnails stuck in them. There has to be a better way to show off our past success stories. Any ideas? What do you do in your gyms?
The first thing that I would say is, assuming people give you permission, which, I mean, it sounds like if they have these pictures and stuff in there, the sky's the limit, right? Like, we want to leverage that anywhere we can, whether it's internal, like doing it internally is one thing, but obviously the people who are seeing it internally, they're already here. How can we use it to provide evidence, to provide social proof that, hey, this is a place you might be interested in coming to, depending on what the offerings are, any of those sorts of things. But adding it to your Google business listing. I mean, you can make posts about that sort of stuff. Putting it on websites and having a wall of fame, so to speak, right? Social media posts, sending out emails about it, telling stories about people's experience if you have those. If you've got anything that somebody's willing to share about the journey and not just evidence that they were here, then that sort of stuff could be used in any format that you could possibly distribute it. So, I mean, kind of tongue in cheek, I would tell you the answers where couldn't you use it, right? But the thing about any sort of professional athlete, I mean, it's essentially an endorsement or evidence that, hey, if this person can trust this place, then I can, right? Because their livelihood depends on this sort of thing. Or, and some of it's a status thing too. Like, I go the same place that this person goes, right? Mm-hmm. But that's fine. Like, people make their choices for their own reasons. But if we want this to potentially factor into their choices, whether it's giving them confidence that we are better at something, then we can say, hey, I worked with this person. And that happens a lot, right? Like, I get people who say they trust me out of the gate because they're like, well, you worked with this person or that person along the way. You worked with Eric Cressy, or you did this with Mike Robertson, and for them, that just provides some credibility and peace of mind, because they're thinking, well, this person's really successful, and so there's this association, right? But the flip side of it is somebody may say, well, hey, I've got the same business coach that person had. And, I mean, however people make their decisions, we want them to make as informed a decision as possible. So if this is something that you think would aid somebody in their decision-making process, then really the goal is just like, where are your people, the people you're trying to reach? How do we make sure they see this? If you think of it that way, I shared a few examples, but I mean, we used social proof on direct mail campaigns, on flyers, on newspaper ads. We took, before and afters and used it anywhere we could. So I would think that the sky's the limit.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Fitness Business School. Before you go, I have a quick announcement. One of the things that we've been doing with our current clients is taking them through this ideal business diagnostic. And really what it is, this checklist that allows you to pinpoint exactly what your business needs next, so you can keep improving, keep growing, and build a business that you love to own. One that pays you well, one that allows you to have the impact you want to have, and one that allows you to have a lifestyle that you truly enjoy. In this diagnostic, we walk through everything and we do an evaluation and can instantly pinpoint what you need to do next to build that business that you want. I'm going to extend this opportunity to get on with either me or my team and take you through this evaluation and fix your business's most vital needs fast. So if we take you through this, you're going to be able to make those vital changes that you need to finally have what I call your ideal business. If you'd be interested in going through this entirely free, risk-free diagnostic with us and learn what you already have in place, what you're doing well, and where your greatest opportunities for rapid improvement are, just shoot me an email with diagnostic in the subject line to pat@patrigsby.com. Again, an email to pat@patrigsby.com with diagnostic in the subject line will get you scheduled and take you through this evaluation to help you build the business you want.